Today we have Josh Kohn on the podcast, and he's followed a self-proclaimed eclectic career path through graduating from Davidson College, which is Griffin's alma mater, to commissioning into the infantry and being able to pursue investment banking with no MBA and no mathematics-based undergrad. He's a great example of taking a big risk, but also understanding what those risks look like. It's a great episode, and the biggest benefit of listening might be to your putting game.
Most people you talk to when transitioning out of the military have never actually transitioned out themselves. You're probably getting a bunch of opinions from people who plan on staying in until retirement and have no idea how to actually show empathy for your situation. This podcast is about providing fresh perspectives and a front row seat for conversations with successful veterans doing big things after leaving the military. Jack's on the other side of the world in Hawaii, just wishing that he was in North Carolina like the two of us.
Yeah, obviously.
Jack,
it had to be Hawaii with that shirt. It was that, or you just became an uncle.
Yeah. No, it's fun. It is more acceptable here to be in the crazy aloha shirt. We love it.
Yeah, I have a couple Hawaiian shirts, but I only wear them when I see my nieces. Just
Right.
like, I'm an uncle. I got no responsibilities here. You guys want ice cream? Let's do it. I'm wearing a Hawaiian shirt.
Well, Griff, do you want to get into it?
Absolutely. One last Hawaiian shirt story. One of my very first dates with my now wife, Liz, I wore a Hawaiian shirt and she thought I was wearing it ironically. I wasn't. It's just, that was the theme of the day. And somehow she still married me. It still worked out. But yeah, word of advice for anyone out there, don't wear pineapple Hawaiian shirts on your first date. Anyways, so Josh and I went to the same college, actually, north of Charlotte at Davidson College. They call it the Princeton of the South, or really they call Princeton the Davidson of the North. But so a lot of great expectations for this conversation. Josh is an impressive guy. But yeah, I'd love to start off, Josh. We have the commonality of commissioning RTC out of Davidson. Can you kind of give us a little bit of your background, where you went after that, a little bit of your Army story, and then where you ventured off from there?
Yeah, it's an eclectic story. So I always give the disclaimer and I give the same disclaimer to anyone with kids, is that I have an N of one. So do not listen to my advice unless your name is mine and all details are the same. But hopefully somebody can use it as a cautionary tale. So I graduated from Davidson, commissioned as an infantry lieutenant the day before graduation. Went off to Fort Lewis, Washington, and taught land nav for a few months. So actually, when I say Fort Lewis, we were staying in a motel in Fife, Washington, doing 24 hours on, 24 hours off, 24 hours on, 48 hours off, and playing around with cadets in the woods for the summer before getting transitioned down to the artist formerly known as Fort Benning, now Fort Moore. And that's where I did the infantry course. I was, I believe, the last class that went through Bullock 2. So, Griff, I don't even know if you're familiar with Bullock 2. It didn't exist when you were there. It was their branch agnostic basic officer leadership course. So
that sounds horrible.
Yeah, it was absolutely
one Bullock
ridiculous.
Was plenty for both me and Jack.
Yeah. And now imagine if they took all the lieutenants from every branch and put them either at SIL or at Benning and put them in barracks and did like LDAC, but everyone's already a lieutenant.
Was the purpose just to make combat arms guys feel better about themselves in comparison?
Pretty much, yeah. It was chaotic, and the wild thing being in the last class that, they're deactivating the program is some of the lieutenants figured out, oh, if I don't do this and I don't pass, they can't recycle me. The only option is I just move forward. So it got a little hairy there at the end. But I digress. So we
That's kind of a risk, though. Like I don't know.
Oh yeah. Some people pushed it a little too far. There was I think that we had probably 2 GOMARs out for second lieutenants before you even get branch qualified. It's impressive. So not me. I did not get a GOMAR. Let's clarify that. So I went to IBOLIC. We hang out down there for way too long, so I ended up doing mech leader, sniper employment. Went to Ranger school, got my Ranger tab. I was actually in the class and surviving the cut, so you can see me in there being skinny, hungry, and tired. And then went to airborne school and on to Fort Campbell and 101st, Rakkasan. So I was a platoon leader and then an X-3rd Brigade and deployed to Afghanistan as a chief of operations, coming back and going to selection, got selected, went to the Q course, and that is where my military journey ended. I think I had some really great colonels and instructors there who were like, you don't want this. Like you're thinking about something else. And they saw it before I was ready to see it. And I, can't thank them enough because in my mind, I would love to do it, but if you wake up thinking about anything other than your soldiers and the mission, it's just not for you. And so I went to go transition and went to New York, and somebody hoodwinked me into investment banking. I worked at JP Morgan in investment banking. I finally escaped that. I'm a recovering investment banker. I've been clean since 2018. Came back down here to Charlotte. Actually, my roommate from Davidson, who was in Ranger School with me, convinced me to come back down, brought my girlfriend at the time, now my wife. She very reasonably said, "Hey, can we visit North Carolina first before we move down there?" So made that compromise and came down to visit. Worked at Passport, ran several product lines there, started with the mobility, so I was the public transit product, and then took over enforcement and permits. My managing director from JP Morgan called me out of the blue and said, "Hey, I know someone doing something in public finance and technology. You're the only person I know who's done that. Do you want to meet with them?" I met with what became my two co-founders at DebtBook. So I was the third co-founder there, ran client operations, so implementation, support, hired directors who were more experienced than me in those roles, which is not very hard. And then took over business operations, so hired other people, and then I was kind of an acting CFO there before we got to Series A. I took a knee, stepped away. They no longer needed ballast to jump around and create systems. And I went to go do some consulting, had the wonderful opportunity to go to Japan and build a digital innovation lab for a large Japanese conglomerate that makes everything from personal massagers to nuclear power plants. So a wide range of programs that they have there. Really fun, played a bunch of golf and realized that I'm never going to be the ball striker that I would like to be, but I can improve my putting. So I went and got a putter fitting because I wanted to buy the Scotty Cameron I'd already decided I was going to buy, but needed the numbers to back me up. They hooked me up on a putting sensor, and all of a sudden there was all this data about my stroke. And I was blown away. I was like, well, how do I get one of these? And they said, yeah, it's starting price around $8,000. And I went, well, that's never going to happen. So I did the only responsible thing is I quit my consulting job and started Meridian when Meridian Performance Systems is our startup. My co-founder is a PhD in computer vision and machine learning from Penn, and it is all about putting a machine learning computer vision model on your mobile phone and turning your mobile phone into that professional grade putting studio that other people are charging $8,000 and $50,000 for, and now you can just have it with you.
Wow.
And
Well, a few parts I'd love to dive into, Josh. To start off,
Yeah,
I'd love
that's
to.
awesome.
So you mentioned going to the Q course and then things taking a pivot from there. I think a lot of people kind of hit that point in a career or in the military or whatever it is where they have something really detailed in their mind, but that's just not how it plays out in real life. How did you mentally respond to that? What kind of thought process did you go through reacting to that and pivoting to the next step? Because I think on paper, a lot of people would say you landed on your feet with investment banking. You would say you're recovering from that, but tell us more about that process.
Yeah, and this one's hard. I don't think that I responded well. I think it just really set me back. But the more time I have away from it, I think taking an L at that point in my career was a gift. And I am still incredibly close with friends from the course who went on to lead ODAs and do things. And actually, we vacation with them and their wives and kids all together. And so I, stay close to that community in that way. But, it was a huge knock to my pride. Going from I'm a infantry captain, I've deployed to Afghanistan, I have a ranger tab, nothing can stop me, to kind of the vague and ambiguous, like, this isn't right for you. And there was a lot of pushback, I would say, from me in trying to justify it and being angry, but also respecting the regiment there and what they're doing. I was really fortunate to have Colonel Mike Perry kind of reach out to me and be like, "Hey, I think you're great." He was disappointed I wasn't moving forward, but he wanted to see me succeed, and he spent a lot of one-on-one time with me talking through what did I want to do, where did I want to be going, and so I think that was a real blessing for me that I had someone who was willing to reach out and, a colonel doesn't need to reach out to a captain and say, "Hey, you're not even in my chain of command, but I want to stay close with you." So,
That's sort of like the way you describe that, though.
mhm.
Clearly, you were going to be successful, right? Because you didn't, at least this is the way you portrayed it, right? Like, yeah, it was a knock, right? It sounds like, it wasn't something that you were prepared for, but you turned it into like a learning experience and you pivoted and you probably worked your ass off after that to continue. And we call them crucible moments, right? These things that
Mhm.
like not necessarily like a bed of roses,
Yeah.
like these things, but they drive you for future and they also impact your decision making in the future to make you that much better, that much more focused, and make sure that you're pursuing the things that you will be successful in. I love what you said too. It spoke to me a little bit. Like, I love people who have stories like yours where you found success through a little bit of luck with a lot of hard work, right? Like that the guy calling you up and saying, "Hey, you're the only guy that I know that's kind of in this realm. Do you want me to put you in touch with this person?" There's a lot of people, don't have an exact percentage, but there's a percentage of people who won't make that call, right?
Yeah.
They'll get that call or they'll get that inquiry and they
Mhm.
do nothing with it. And that's where I'm talking about. Like, there's ways to force your luck a little bit. And it sounds like you've done that multiple times. Like, you've actually, you can create your own luck and then you follow through with a lot of hard work, and that's what creates the success. It sounds like that's worked out.
Yeah, I think a couple things just from what you were saying is I have a policy and my wife reminds me of it constantly. And she just brings it up and says, when she sees other people not following it, is inexperienced people will only take an interview if they're 90% sure they want the job. I need to be 90% sure that I'm not interested to not take the meeting. I will
Mhm.
just take any meeting because you never know what you're going to find out. And I think back to, the statistics around how people find jobs, and it's almost never through a first level connection. It's that second level connection of, oh, I know somebody, you should meet them. And then that ends up becoming something. So I think just being open, both on receiving advice and then when you have advice to give, just making sure you're available.
Yeah, and for like a transitioning service member, that's like actionable advice, right? Like,
Yeah.
you don't have to only take the interviews for the job that you think you're going to get, because if you
No.
take five or six maybe interviews
Mhm.
before that, one, you're getting a chance to just talk through what's in your brain on your
Yeah.
transition. So those five interviews, you might bomb three of them and they never call you back. But by the time you get to that sixth interview on the job that you want, you've got a little bit more experience talking through your thoughts and actually portraying what you want to showcase to that employer. And I think it helps people get ready for when it's for real.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do dry runs and dress rehearsals all the time. So you got to transition all your same tactical skill set over to the civilian world.
Right.
I had to look this up briefly, but there was a neurologist from the 70s who I think was the first to kind of coin the four different types of luck, one being blind luck, two being luck of motion, and then luck of awareness and luck of uniqueness. And I think
Mhm.
you're hitting on several of those pieces. You can kind of, to Jack's point, you can kind of manually increase the surface area of your luck, that the chances that you can get lucky through, and you're hitting on number two, luck of motion, just purely being in motion, having conversations, talking to people, adding value through those conversations, making connections for them. We talk a lot on this show about how you can provide value to others. And a lot of that may not be as overt as you might think, or like finding something unique to give to them. It might just be following up with them and saying, thank you for that connection. This is where it led to, and letting them know that their
Yeah.
time was well spent. So I love the fact that you were putting that luck into motion. What was it that ended up landing on investment banking when you made that transition? Was that kind of what you had in mind? Was that the next kind of great step in the saga of your journey?
I would say there's a couple parts to it. One, I loved the mission planning aspect. He and all of that. I know a lot of people hate it, but when you get to do a really interesting mission and you get to really put some unconventional thought into it, that was really fun for me. And so in talking to people, they said, if you really like coming up with a plan and thinking it through, it's in numbers instead of an operational motion, but you should at least look at investment banking and consulting. And then the second part of that is it seemed like the hardest thing that people were telling me I wouldn't be able to do. If you talk to any of the JMO recruiters, they're like, no, you're not going to get into investment banking. You're going to go work at Cintas and you're going to go do, all of these. Like you're good at managing 35 people. Let's just give you a team of 35 people. And I had no interest in that. And as soon as they told me that it wasn't possible, I was like, yeah, well, that's what I'm going to do. So that's how I really started targeting investment banking. I was not a math person back in school. I think math just didn't click with me in the classroom. Once I was in the army and I saw the value adds of math and went to Pathfinder school, and I was like, oh, there's some cool stuff that you can think about. And, talking to FOs and all that stuff. And I was like, all right. And then once I decided to go into investment banking, I just studied for the GMAT and did well enough to give me some credibility to make up for my lack of mathematical background. One of my fun stats, if anyone's listening that thinks, well, I can't get into investment banking because I didn't do that in undergrad and I don't have any experience. Fun game. How many finance or accounting courses do you think I took in college?
What was your major?
Sociology.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
Probably zero then.
It is zero. It is zero. I took one math course just to knock out my credit and was exploring mathematical ideas. So, yeah, after the fact, after they hired me at JP Morgan, I told somebody that, and they're like, oh no, what have we done?
We got that
But
contract signed though, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. No, I was already working there for several months before I let that one slip. But yeah, there's nothing in the, except for jobs where there's certification. I'm not saying throw on a stethoscope, walk into a hospital and be like, I can be a doctor. But most of these jobs, it's 90% on the job training. And can you show up, work harder, and be someone that people don't hate being around for long periods of time?
So, sociology major, no math
Yeah.
courses, no
Yeah.
MBA, and then straight into investment banking right after service.
Yeah, it was a deliberate choice to not go to business school after none of them accepted me. So, yeah, we had a mutual agreement. They said, you will not be attending here. And I said, well, you okay.
But that tracks because like the schools care very much about the schooling.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, well, you don't have this undergrad experience. You must need that to be successful at our school. But I love that you don't take no for an answer. And that's the cool thing about it is the different backgrounds is what's going to help the team in a different way. Because how many did have that, the undergrad that matched the MBA that then, okay, now they've just been fed the same information their entire lives and they don't have that other experience to go off of. And I think, generally makes sense to have more than one type of person on a team.
Diverse teams of psychological safety have the best outcomes. It's not debatable.
And you're the quintessential example of one of the strongest attributes I think that most military folks have when they leave the service is finding a way to yes, just getting things done and not taking no for an answer, finding a way around 3-foot obstacles by just refusing to yield. So, I mean, it's remarkable. I mean, a lot of people would see JP Morgan and think, oh, I need to accomplish X, Y, and Z. It's probably going to take me 10 years and maybe not even approach that road to begin with. But in Josh Kohn's mind, that was no obstacle. That's amazing. So moving from JP Morgan, I mean, and we don't necessarily need to dwell here, but I'd love to talk a little bit about you spent a couple years at a few different positions afterwards.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk about, a lot of people say have some tenure at a place to really learn that expertise deeply. Others will say jump around because you can get a diverse set of experiences. You can have some building blocks to stack on one another. And you also can probably incrementally get better compensation too when you're moving around. How would you speak to that that dichotomy and the approach that you took with the couple different opportunities?
I've definitely heard that advice and it definitely stuck in my head. There was times when I said, I can't leave. I'm going to be labeled as a jumper. But I've put myself in a position where I'm in the startup world and it hasn't hurt me. Going back to that luck of putting yourself in the position. I really had to look at what am I good at? And I'm good at making order from chaos. I'm good at applying kind of that organizational, creating a process or taking a template and a format, leaning on the MDMP or leaning on the strategic design type aspects and saying, all right, we have nothing, I can make something, which makes me really great for that Pathfinder mission. If we're doing a startup, I can start us and get us in the right direction, and then find people who love getting it to perfection. I like getting it to good and then the exciting thing is finding the next project.
That speaks to me directly. I'm not sure many people are in that realm or whatever, but I love the steep learning curve. Griffin will know this. I was on tanks and then I was airborne, and then my last job was as a data analytics for the Army. So I kind of just every couple of years just changed and did something new. And I don't see that slowing down here on the civilian side either. So that speaks to me for sure. I love the new idea and really diving in and creating something. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and it goes back to the I have an N of one, so I'm always careful to say, oh, don't stick around and just get pigeonholed into one job. There's
Right.
people who do that and they're excellent at it. It's just not my area of expertise, and so I had to make my career work for what works for me.
Yeah.
But I imagine at each step of the way, there were probably multiple opportunities, right? It wasn't like, I mean, maybe in a couple instances that it was like this one thing kind of popped out of nowhere. But I imagine there were a number of opportunities that several different divergent paths that could have been chosen at each point. How did you approach choosing the right one? How did you differentiate between what might have been a distraction or maybe a shiny object kind of direction versus the right path?
Yeah, I generally I don't make a jump without looking. So, it, and I think we kind of think about careers like someone's going to come and offer you a job and you have to say yes or no in the room. I've never had that opportunity. So for me, it's always been, hey, what do we think about this? And I think about it and I tend to go with what can I not stop thinking about? And that's the problem I need to solve. We had I thought up the idea for Meridian and I spent 6 months trying to convince myself not to do it. My daughter was born this past January. She just turned one. And so I was like, well, am I going to go on paternity leave and not come back and start a company and go to zero income? That's not a smart idea, but I couldn't stop thinking about the problem. And so I made the jump, thinking about I got into investment banking and I needed to get out of investment banking. The people weren't bad. It's not a sustainable life. And it is the same every day in and out, and it just wasn't where I could thrive. So I got into technology because it was where I could learn the most. And then I went into startup world and I got out of, went from being a product manager to running client implementation, client success, because when I was at Passport, the people closest to the clients had the most insight on where the business needed to go. And so that was what we needed. We had a CEO, we had a CTO and product leader. So I took everything else and just got as close to the customer and client as I could. And then went and did consulting and went back up into the strategy away from the tactical stuff. It's looking for where I can learn and where I can solve a problem.
I love
That's
that framework. What can I not stop thinking about?
Yeah.
What was it about the problem that Meridian is solving that you just couldn't?
I just kept on thinking about there are so many premium grade solutions that are out there and they're really cool. I was last week was the PGA show. I was down in Orlando and Full Swing, they had the moving green from TGL, if you're, a
Mhm.
golf fan there. And it's just amazing technology. And then there's everything from platform golf, and that's another moving one. There's Sam Putt Lab, which is the market leader in watching your stroke of your putting, but there's nothing for consumers. There's a few kind of things out there, but realized if you want to get better at putting, it's just creating a daily habit. So in order to build a habit, it's got to be accessible. It's got to be intuitive. You have to have insight, and then it's got to be engaging. And so mirrors, a laser pointer, a couple gates or a putting target are not engaging. There's nothing to help track your progress and keep you coming back. And then there's a ton of apps that are accessible, and some of them are pretty engaging, or golf apps rather, but they're not about putting. And so looking at that market, we said, there's 47 million Americans who play golf. It's the largest growing sport in America. It's the only club you use on every hole, makes up about 50% of your strokes, some of us more because we're three, four, and five putting it around. And just nobody is serving this section. So why is that? And I talked to as many people as I could and was really fortunate to get connected with some really great PGA pros. And they all said, not just for the everyday player, even tour players and their coaches don't have a mobile solution that they can take out on the practice green ahead of a round.
Yeah, that's what I was actually just going to ask. Was it for more of a beginner, or it can be used by pretty much anybody to just like, it sounds like as long as you have a mobile phone, you can use it.
Yeah, so anyone who's got a mobile phone, use it. We are making it really accessible, really intuitive. We focus on your stroke consistency rather than the details of your stroke. We have the hard numbers there, but the truth is there's no one perfect putting stroke. So what matters is, can you replicate your stroke every single time? Famously, Tiger Woods has a very consistent stroke, but if you look at one individual putt, he leaves his putting face open, and so he has to adjust that with his green reading, which he does excellent. His son kind of dimed him out in I believe it was a Golf Digest article, and said, "Yeah, when my dad reads greens, I have to aim like 2 feet to the left, otherwise I'd miss it because they just have different strokes."
Wow.
Um, but that's kind of the beauty of it. And so we focus on the consistency, which then allows us to give really digestible information back to the player. And I built it, originally with the team, and we have a fantastic team, by the way. My co-founder is a PhD in computer vision. We have a product lead from Whoop, and we've got devs from AWS. So we're really fortunate there and have some PGA pros helping advise us. But I built it for myself. I said, there's so many people like me who just have nothing. And every golfer I talk to is like, yeah, my putting's trash and I don't really have anything that I stick with. So I said, why don't we make the Duolingo for putting or the Whoop for putting? And that's where we started. And the more teaching pros and coaches of tour players we talk to, they say, yeah, well, we would also like this. So can
Mhm.
you make it work for both? And I think if you make the right thing that people understand intuitively, it's going to be usable for both.
How did you go from this being just a golf hobby or maybe an obsession to a viable building a team around it, connecting with the right PGA pros and others? I mean, that's a pretty big step that in hindsight may be easy to kind of just gloss over pretty quickly. But I mean, there's a lot of work, a lot of connections. How did you go about that whole process of putting an actual product around this idea?
Yeah, so when I left my first startup, I had the opportunity to make a very small angel investment in a automated robotic mower for industrial scale. So think about the infield of airport flight lines or like an Air Force base, something like that, where you don't want somebody on a rider mower when there's a C5 taking off right next to them. And from talking to the founders there, they really built it around computer vision and it being able to map and learn and identify objects and drive autonomously. I got really into computer vision. I thought, like, this is really cool. I think it's the branch of artificial intelligence that gets none of the attention, but has 90% of the real world utility in actually changing people's lives. But I can't do computer vision. You actually do need some qualifications for that. So I was a consultant. I was going back and forth to Tokyo, helping them validate products and new businesses and running them through a process to evaluate them and then stand up the proof of concept and bring it to market. And so I just ran that process that I was teaching them for myself, validating, hey, is this a product that people would want? What is the challenge in actually delivering it? People tend to think about, is it viable? Is it feasible? Is it desirable? I think about it as your viability. Is it more desirable than the feasibility lift? How hard it is to deliver to your audience. And so as I went through and talked to the co-founders that I had invested in. I said, "What do you think about this?" They said, "Somebody could do it. We're not doing it. We're working on our own thing." And so I just put out feelers to make a connection with anyone in computer vision. I was very fortunate to get connected with my co-founder's husband's former coworker said, "Hey, I saw you were looking to talk to somebody. My friend's husband's a PhD in computer vision. Do you want to meet him?" It's like, yeah. So we got on a call, we started talking, and my assumption on that call was he's overqualified. He was a founder of Avere. They got acquired post, or co-founder of Avere, got acquired post Series B. He's now working at the acquiring company. There's no way he wants to come down and do this weird golf startup idea I have. And I asked him for recommendations of anyone else I should meet with, and he said no. And I was like, oh man. And he's like, no, I'm gonna do this with you. So I got on a plane. I flew out to San Diego to meet with him, take him and his husband out to dinner, and we spent a day working together, kind of figuring out like, is this actually a good fit and a good idea? And when I left, we had outlined our founder agreement and started off and running. And then I just reach out to people. So I got in touch with one golf pro. That golf pro introduced me to another golf pro. That golf pro, and if you say we want to make something for you, I'm not trying to charge you money. I just want to figure out what you need. People tend to make those introductions, and that's how we just started getting these coaching advisors. And it's been a self-growing network. Set up a few meetings at the PGA show, and every single meeting we set up there, somebody brought at least one or two other people who they had talked about Meridian and said they were curious and open to know more.
Wow. I
That's
love
awesome.
resounding theme. Ask for money and people give you advice. And in your case,
Yeah.
ask for advice and people give you money, or they end up working with you as a
Yeah.
overqualified co-founder. That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Not many people are out there creating a golf simulator, but I think I want to try to bridge this to people who are transitioning out of the military or thinking of making a transition. At what point, like how viable was this? Did you guys have a product out before you basically quit your job and started doing this full time? Or at what point in the process were you when you made that decision, like this is going to be the thing?
We had been kind of working part-time on it together for a few months. So as I was doing market validation and talking to customers and figuring out if this is a thing people really wanted, Cody was doing kind of the feasibility work of building this computer vision model. And the whole app runs on a patent pending computer vision model that he built from scratch. So the one magic thing for us is I found somebody who could do essentially it all himself. And then we just needed the front end on top of it to be consumer friendly and good looking and engaging.
Mhm.
But which is not nothing. That's an incredibly big lift. But when we realized that we could have our own patent pending technology that could run on your phone and capture data points that even some of the really high premium systems can't get, which is the club and the ball simultaneously actual observed metrics. We're like, well, can really be something. And that's when I decided to make the jump. But yeah, it is not without fear.
But that's what
Think,
something we kind of want to communicate with people, and you've hit a couple of the things that are probably in the back of people's minds right now. It's like, okay, if you can't stop thinking about something that's not the military, maybe that's a sign. And if
yeah.
you've got this idea that you've talked to a lot of people about and it seems like there's a lot of interest, maybe that's another sign. And if
Mhm.
you've got a partner that you can find that can help you solve some problems, well, maybe that's not now the stars are starting to align and then maybe it is, less risk than people realize because if it's something you're really into, you're going to be successful at it. Now, I'm sure it doesn't come with no hard work like we've mentioned before,
Yeah.
right?
There is hard work and there is risk, and so I never want to have survivor's bias of telling people just do it, just quit your job and
Right.
have a baby and not have income, and you'll figure it out because I've heard enough of people kind of giving parenting advice, but like, don't worry about it. No one really knew what they're doing, and all the kids survived. I'm like, well, they didn't all survive. So let's not
My
just
favorite.
focus on the situation where it worked out and then say, don't worry about the
I was
consequences.
at the park, and it's a small caveat. I was at the park last night, and it was so I literally was laughing I was trying to hold it in, but there were two moms
Hmm.
that had to have known what they were doing, but their conversation was just about bragging about how good their kids were. And I was just listening, and but to your point, like a lot of it is just what your kid is good at, right? Like it's not that your kid is a genius in all realms, but she was like, oh yeah, my kid was potty trained before she was 2. And then the other one would say like, oh, she slept through the night. She's never not slept through the night. And they were just like one-upping each other with all of these things. And I'm like, we're at the park, guys. It's not like
Yeah.
you don't have to brag about your kid
Yeah.
and be better than somebody. It's
Jack
okay.
Jack walks over and goes, "Oh yeah, well my son ate a full gallon of sand before he was 1. Beat that."
Yeah.
Right. No.
No,
How'd you know about that, Griffin?
Just a guess.
Yeah, I think we can get into the parenting stuff too, but just going back to the other like most valuable thing, and this is whether it's your spouse, your partner, business partner, whatever it is, find someone who's smarter or better than you. If you can find someone better than you, then you're going to be okay. And my co-founder, and I've surrounded myself with a team that each of them and what they do, they are better than me at what they do, and that's why they're there. And so I can trust them to do the best thing, or at least do much better than I would do in their shoes.
Has that been a focus for like your whole life, or has that been learned through like your time in the infantry and forward?
I don't know where it came from. I think it's always nice to have a mentor, and I think I understood the value of a mentor pretty early on. And so I've always looked for a mentor, and I think that the darkest times was when I felt like I didn't have someone to look up to. And a lot of times, the founder journey is a pretty lonely one, even if you have a co-founder, because you're just doing your job. And, especially if you're in the CEO seat, you kind of are the ultimate decision maker. And there's not a battalion commander above you. There's not a brigade commander above you. It's just you, and the team's going to live and die with that. So I think I've been through toxic work environments where the organization wasn't great, and I've been in really great environments. And I've found a couple frameworks that I really like. 5 dysfunctions of the team. We're essentially 4 people, and I had everybody on our team read that book, Patrick Lencioni, and we all discussed it the first time I got everybody together, because I wanted to make sure that we were doing right by each other and going to have the best outcome.
Well, it takes someone who's hungry, humble, and smart to say that, to surround yourself with people that are smarter, better, or more capable than you are, which is, exactly why they were attracted to working with you and partnering on such a venture. That's awesome.
Nice subtle ideal team player flex there with the hungry, smart.
Exactly. Well, Josh, one 2-part question we ask every guest is one ask and one give. So first being, what's one way that somebody listening to this could help or provide value to you?
Yeah. If you're a golfer, you just love technology, go to puttmeridian.com, or you can download our app. We're doing a rolling invite only right now as we scale for delivery, but more people using it, all the better, and give us feedback. Just help us make the technology better, make the user experience better. And so you can just go in the App Store and do Meridian Putt, and we'll be right in there. We are, if there's anybody listening from the venture side of things or the angel investing side, we are actually doing a pre-seed round. So we're always looking at talking to value-added investors and people who are passionate about the sport or technology. And we have some pretty big ambitions, but we're going to be really diligent and responsible with how we go about it. I think that's it for me that I would ask for. I do have a 2-parter of the ask, and the other one's just that if you're around the Carolinas, check out Veterans Bridge Home. Whether you're a veteran or not, support it. It's a great organization based here in Charlotte, but tentacles extending out, and there's Upstate Warrior Solutions down in South Carolina, and I'm sure there's others, but I'm very close with the Veterans Bridge Home team. They're phenomenal. And if you're a veteran, even if you don't need support, there are socializing events. So every month there's a veteran coffee. Just come grab coffee and hang out. And it's a great organization because they don't try to be all things to all people. It's just how can we connect veterans to the resources that they need so that they can thrive, whether it's, hey, I've been at the bank and I just need to talk to another veteran because I'm going to lose my mind at these people, or maybe people need actual more quantifiable support. So please give them a look and help out if you can.
Yeah, thanks for adding that. Is that a North Carolina specific group at the moment, and is that their premise, connecting veterans with resources both statewide and nationally to provide help in whatever area they're looking for?
Yeah, so it's right now it's based in the Carolinas, mostly North Carolina specific, but they have connections to other organizations all up and down the Eastern Seaboard, and then I'm sure as it continues to grow, it'll reach farther. But it's a great organization, just a great structured process for getting people the things they need.
Yeah, for sure. And then, you've given us some great advice already, but any give to the audience, anything you would offer to someone listening to this?
Yeah, absolutely. If you are not tired of hearing me ramble on, reach out. I'm on LinkedIn, or you can, I'm sure there's an email or something on there too. You can cold outreach me if you're transitioning from the military and you just need to talk to somebody. We didn't get to it here, but when I was getting out and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do, I cold LinkedIn messaged a number of people, and Matt Miggy he's a partner at Crosslink Partners now, big VC guy, had no reason to talk to lowly infantry captain who sent him along. Hey, sir, pleasure to be introduced to you and connected, because I think it was, I'd been on LinkedIn for about a minute. But he responded, he took the phone call and gave me real sound advice. And so passing that forward, if somebody's just needs an idea or wants to bounce some transition thoughts off me, I'm here and I'll always help out a veteran.
Thank you. Yeah, and we'll drop your LinkedIn and other information in the show notes for this.
Mm-hmm.
Josh, one thing I've been thinking about is a new thought-provoking question each week. So I'd like to ask you one and see where it goes. So imagine you receive a letter from your future self. What would you want it to say?
It would say, you did good and you did well. Never ending mission is to, I need to do well. I've got a family to support and loved ones, but if I don't do good and be a positive force, then it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. No, I mean that's simple and very wise. Because if you just do those two things, then that's absolutely, it's kind of the definition of success, in my opinion, right? I think, well, it seems like you've survived this cut. Uh, So you're golden. Thank you so much for joining us. I really do appreciate people like you are taking the time to kind of join us. I mean, it is once a week. We publish every week. We're just trying to give unique scenarios. And like you said, you're just one person, and people aren't going to fit into your box. But having the many people we've had on and having your unique perspectives and they can weigh those, I think that was great. And I think the big take, it's funny because you connect, hey, reach out to me, cold email me, but kind of mention this at the beginning, like do the thing, like actually do it. Don't be presented with an opportunity, which is a lucky thing, and then squander it by not really following through. So, what we want people to know is like when we're putting these things out, like actually do it. It's gonna really lead to the success, and it might lead to something you didn't even have in your view. Like it might be completely random. You might introduce them to their future employer, right?
Yeah,
So that's what we love about this.
And the best people to take advice from are those that have said exactly what you said. My path is just one. This is not the way that I'm prescribing for everyone, because there's so many. I personally experienced a lot of senior military officers who said, this is the path that I took. This is what you should do because I had success doing it. And I want to see you replicate that success. And that's just not an immediate little yellow flag should pop up anytime you hear anything remotely resembling that sort of preface to advice. And so, yeah, really well said, Josh. And any final thoughts or piece of advice for those that are currently transitioning from the military or considering transitioning?
Yeah. So prior to coming on here, I called actually a good friend that went through the Q course with, and we were talking about what is that experience that should pass along. And we kind of settled on that you are not the only person who can do your job, but while it's your job, you're the only one to do it. So if you're in the military, you're still a platoon leader or company commander, there's no excuse to not give it everything. And when it's time to transition, it's really hard, but don't have that guilt of, oh my God, I've abandoned my soldiers, because there were company commanders before you and there will be many company commanders after you. And that transitions actually pretty well to the civilian world as well, is you're not the only person who can do this job, but while it's your job, you're the only one to do it. So you owe it to the whole team to do it right.
We've seen that time and time, like in the military or out. Leaders like to sometimes create self-fulfilling prophecies when the unit relies on them for success, and then they leave and the unit fails and they go, "Oh, look, it was all because of me." But yeah, that mindset, it applies so well. Like, yeah, you're not the only one. The army will continue to roll,
Yep.
but do your best while you're in that position. That's awesome. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
Is there a
Different.
putter in that golf bag behind you? I can't quite tell. He's got a few of them within reach. Can't leave them parked in the bag.
Nah, no, I use the mat right here for putting next to the desk.
Is the app paid use right now, or how does it?
No, so it's actually free right now while we're doing our kind of early audience testing and
Yeah.
do that. So you
My
download
dad,
it.
this is gonna sound,
Yeah.
I don't, well, I don't know how it's gonna sound. My dad is the best putter I've ever seen in my entire life.
Putt or
And
real golf?
No, well, the funny thing is he didn't start golfing until he came to Hawaii. So he moved here when he was like 63 and he's
Mhm.
picked up golf. And I'm telling you, I've seen like he will make multiple 20-foot putts in a round. And it's just natural. It's like he's barely checking the green out and he'll just make the putt. I'm like,
He's got Josh's app. He didn't tell you.
yeah, yeah, right. But yeah. So I'm thinking of getting him set up on it and seeing what he thinks about it and stuff because he loves just working on putting because that's his strong. So
Yeah, no, so it's the only club you can use in the living room more than once. So
you can
we
do it.
designed it to set up and just kind of you putt, it automatically catches it. It records every putt you take. We'll show you your progress, show you how many putts you did. You can set some goals. So we're really
Nice.
excited for it.
I'm gonna show up to putt next time with this app ready to go and just break a course record, baby.
Just dominate.
It's
We've never had anybody shoot an 18 before.
it is people joke, but like putt is actually like a useful skill if you were to use your ball in your club, and it's just like understanding how the ball's going to roll. But it really is the game within the game. Your dad can be an amazing putter and not be able to drive, but it's just there's people who are amazing drivers and then they just can't putt.
Right.
So,
No, Griffin will actually lose multiple golf balls on a putt course.
True story.
He's got to have a couple in his pocket that he could just drop off when no one's looking.
I usually just drop them in the hole and what do you know?
Yeah. You got to have the secret pocket so it just comes out the bottom of your leg.
There you go.
Josh,
Yeah.
last obscure question here. What would your app react to if you started putting with a hockey stick, Happy Gilmore style?
If you putt with a hockey stick, it'll see the shaft, so we'll be able to give you shaft lean and your stroke timing. It might be a little thrown off because of the curvature of the hockey stick, so it's going to obscure the ball before it starts moving. So some of your data might be a little off.
Better than I expected.
Yeah.
We might have to mark this episode as explicit if we keep talking about shaft lean and stroke count.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Veteran Ventures podcast. If you heard something interesting or found the show to be helpful, send it to a friend who is transitioning out of the military or considering a transition. We'd also really appreciate if you left a rating and review of the show. That helps us reach more people with these amazing stories of successful veterans. We'll catch you next time on the Veteran Ventures podcast. And until then, go do the thing. Make that decision, have that conversation, and go find your next mission.